CCM don't care. You come to election, you don't come to election, this is what they put forward. Because to them, election matter. It gives them legitimacy that we went to election, we campaigned, and we won. I don't see CCM having interest in making the opposition feel that this is also the election and they have a chance to win. And this is one of the reasons that you have the main opposition party, Chadema, not participating in this election. There are some prediction that maybe after the election, there will be a round table and people will go to amend the grievances.
You are listening to the Great Lakes Crisis podcast.
Welcome to the Great Lakes Crisis, the podcast where we unpack the untold stories, political, peace, and power struggles shaping Africa Great Lakes region. I'm your host, Jeremie Nsiku. Today we turn to Tanzania 2025 general election, coming up on October 29th. This isn't just another vote, it's Tanzania's 7th multi-party election since the 1990s, and a real test for its democracy, institutions, and political maturity. To help us break it down, I'm joined by Michael Manjale, a Tanzanian researcher and PhD candidate in political science and public administration at Adam Mickiewicz University in Poland. Michael has been following Tanzanian politics for over 15 years with experience in teaching and civil society. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. So happy to be here and looking forward for the discussion.
Great to have you here. Let's get started.
Thank you.
Michael, in 2024, Tanzania passed new electoral laws following the Presidential Task Force on Multi-Party Democracy. How are these reforms reshape the political field? What are the main changes and do they really make the process fair?
Thank you for the question and thank you for the time here. I'll start with commenting on the political act and the political laws that have been passing last year. These laws is coming from the presidential task force that was formulated when she took power in 2021. And the idea was to create a way that all stakeholders will come and discuss the politics. It was a sort of a roundtable talk. But they are missing what many wish that we could have some laws that address the main problems. And I would say the main problems in our politics goes beyond just the electoral commission or the participation of a private candidate. It's more going to the structure, to the whole process. I'm hesitating to say that these laws are really reforms that will be reflected on our democracy. Starting to unpack that, the Center for Strategic Litigation, their paper took back the discussion of Tanzanian electoral laws, and it goes to when we adopted multi-party in 1992. So the most notable change that could be seen in these laws is the name of the National Electoral Commission, NEC, that now is called INEC, which is Independent National Electoral Commission. This is one of the notable change, but still, when you speak of its neutrality, it's still questionable because when you look at the Section 9.5 of this act, it's called the National Electoral Commission of 2024, you speak about the appointment. The 5 commission, they are still presidential appointees, and the funding in the budget coming from the government. So there is still a question on that. But also, there are questions regarding what would happen for an independent candidate. Still, there is no independent candidate. The issue of technology to be used, we have seen what has been happening in country like Kenya on the election, that you have most of the election coming out as soon as the polling station are giving them out. So when you look at these laws that come to support the political process or the electoral process, they are missing the substantial reform that stakeholders, especially the opposition parties, have been advocating. And this is one of the reason that you have the main opposition party, Chadema, not participating in this election because they think the reform that have been made are not enough.
Is there a gap between reform on paper and reform in practice? Is that what you are saying?
Yeah, I would say that gap. Sometimes we have good laws. For instance, the positive part is speak of having this independent National Electoral Commission. And looking at the measures are taken to make it independent is try to rule out ways of external interferences. We have history of of external interference, especially from the executive when it comes to election process, to results and all that. And this comes because government officials, especially those who are called district executive directors, they have been used as returning officers in constituencies. So they are the one who determine really who is becoming a member of parliament. Those are some of the reflection, and also trying to show the role of the police in the election and all that. So I think there is some light you could see, but it's still dimmed because there is no big reform in the constitution to complement these laws. And that's why you will have still the president with high stake of being re-elected, because there is lots of backing from the executive apparatus. So the gaps between what you can see in the paper and what you'll get is still there and is visible.
That is interesting. So how different is this election from previous one then, given it will be conducted under these new rules?
Well, first, this election is one of the elections that are very interesting. We had two elections in 2010 and 2015, which you could feel this citizen urge to vote, to go out there and try to make a change. I witnessed the election in 2010. I was in secondary school by the time, but there was this atmosphere of people wanting to come out and make their vote count. 2015 was, I would say, the climax of our multi-party democracy, because from there we started going down in a very wrong direction. This election, there was some light, because speaking of the president, Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, when she took the country in a very unexpected situation after the death of John Pombe Magufuli, she wanted to make some reforms. She came with an approach called 4R, which was reconciliation, resilience, reform, and rebuilding. And she took initiative to call everyone at the table, trying to make the political atmosphere or the political environment friendly for everyone. There was some permission for opposition party to carry out their political activities, to carry rallies and some demonstration. That was there. But this election is, I'm really trying to find the word, but it's that election that you don't see the opposition. You are finding them by using as lens or any light, but they're so far to be an actual competitor as it was, let's say, 10 years ago. So these new laws might have a good intention, but coming to practice, this election is not a place that you would measure their performance, because the incumbent is sailing. Maybe in the next election in 2030. But speaking of this election, I believe this laws has a small chance of showing its practical part.
Thank you for bringing up the big shifts for the past decades. You've mentioned it from Magufuli centralized style to President Samia Suluhu Hassan more open approach and 4R agenda. Do you think the 4Rs were a genuine effort at change, or more of a political strategy to maintain control?
I would go with the second answer. I'll try to go historical a bit. Two things happened in 1977. The first one was the union of TANU and Afro Shirazi. So this is when CCM, Chama cha Mapinduzi, the party we know today, was born. And then on that same year, the constitution that we're using now, the United Republic of Tanzania Constitution of 1997, this is when it was written. So you could see that there is some advantage for the ruling party with the constitution being written on the same year, and it has been on the advantage for many years. You cannot overlook the relation between the government and the party. And the 4R is much of that. Trying to pull the opposition close and discuss with them, try to see what is their take. But we won't do big changes, because this is about status quo. It's about making sure the party is holding into power. And I won't say that the 4Rs had really intention to change our political atmosphere for the next year, because we're talking about a new constitution. As I say previous, that 1977 constitution fits into politics of one party, and with 19 parties now, it's not visible. You don't see it. So I think the 4R is one of these efforts of the ruling party and its party caucuses to retain the power, but trying to make the donors and other stakeholders feel that there is democracy going on in the country.
So would it be fair to say that Tanzania is somewhere between reform and restraint right now?
Yes and no. From 2021 to 2025, we have seen some progress comparing to 2015 going to 2021, because there was a loss of repression. You had political party leaders being put to jail on some made-up offenses. And then you had some progress. You could feel that we are getting back to a place where politicians sit on the table and discuss matters of the nation. So yes and no, but I believe as a nation, there is a big gap of what we wish when it comes to our political, to our electoral process, and what is been happening in practice. There are some progress. We cannot compare with other countries that one leader has been in power for 30, 40 years, but then there is some restraint, of course. The reforms that are made, they are not reflecting a political will to change what has been demanded by the stakeholders of an electoral process.
All right, that is insightful. Let us talk about the opposition. Chadema, ACT Wazalendo, and 16 parties have had a rough few years. What shape are they in heading into this election?
The simple way to look at that, you could say, they're scattered. Now they're dispersed. There is a big confusion in the opposition side on what is the course forward from here. Chadema have boycotted this election totally. They don't have any candidate. They won't be going into the ballot. And this is because they didn't sign the code of conduct to come to the election. And their chairperson, whom could have been their presidential candidate, behind bars for treason charges. There are some cases that stop even their political activities. They've been holding different activities, but online, because they cannot go to the field to speak with the citizen. They'll be in trouble because there is a court blockade on their activities. That's one part of the opposition. In Zanzibar, ACT is the remnant of the Civil United Front. It's called CUF. And for the first time, they are going into election in Zanzibar without Maalim Seif, one of the prominent opposition in Zanzibar politics, because when we speak about election in Tanzania, we will have to also speak about that this election is taking place in two sides of the union. You know, you have the island that will have also election for their president and for their ward councillors, but also for the member of House of Representatives. So they have the election there. So ACT for Zanzibar, they are working on that, trying to retain their stronghold in Pemba. But in the mainland, they're also in trouble because they had a presidential candidate that had some court blockade to campaign. So in the mainland, they don't have even a presidential candidate. You know, there is a part called Chauma. It's a very interesting case because this part really gets some energy from February, you know, having some Chadema members who moved from Chadema after their election in January, and they go ahead and move to this party, and their presidential candidate was one of Chadema's top cadres. So there is this confusion, and other parties, I'm trying to be as objective as I can, other parties, they stand no chances because these are parties that for years, they haven't have even one member of parliament. They have like few ward councillors. So the opposition is dispersed, as I said in the beginning. And this situation makes this election one of the boring elections in our history because there is no real opposition and there is no policy talk when it comes to campaign.
What about CCM, the ruling party? How is it taking advantage of the opposition divisions and weaknesses?
CCM is capitalizing on that. They are going to campaign like they have real opposition threatening their chances. And it's clear that they'll win the election. Coming from almost the full parliament of CCM cadres in 2020, from one of very controversial election in our history to what we have today, CCM don't care. You come to election, you don't come to election, this is what they put forward. The presidential candidate and the member of parliament, they're all over the country campaigning. They just go ahead and do the election. Because to them, election matter. It gives them legitimacy that we went to election, we campaigned, and we won. There are some prediction that maybe after the election, there will be a round table and people will try to amend their grievances and to come together and look for next 5 years. But for CCM, it's about consolidating powers and going ahead. So I think opposition doesn't have a chance to stop it. I don't see CCM having interest in making the opposition feel that this is also the election and they have a chance to win.
From what I understand, maybe the opposition biggest fight isn't just about winning power, but about reclaiming space, influencing the national conversation, and challenging CCM dominance.
Well, I think from 2015, there was an atmosphere that the opposition could take the country. Starting from Zanzibar, because in 2015, the election in Zanzibar was cancelled at the last minute. The election in the mainland, there was a candidate that had 40% of the vote for the first time in an environment of Tanzania, 40% of the whole vote is really something to be commended. But I think they are moving from this resistance politics to some relevance politics. Now they are trying to influence policies. You have ACT and you have Chadema that are speaking of alternative policies. They are commenting on economy, foreign policy, on domestic policy, speaking of security, health, education. So if they take charges as a bloc, as they tried in 2015, which really paid them because that was among the most lively when we speak about our parliament. There are almost more than 100 members of parliament from the opposition for the first time in our history. So there is a chance that the opposition has to come together. And from coming together, they have a chance.
As you mentioned the economy, let us shift gears to the economy. Tanzanians be growing at over 5.3% for years, and this is according to the African Development Bank. But what is the story behind those numbers?
When you look at the country, Tanzania is among countries that have resources and they enjoy political stability. So when you look at sectors such as tourism, mining, agriculture, construction, these sectors bring in some economical activities, not only to the expertise, but also to normal people all over the country. The economy is not as dire as you would say, because Tanzania is still regarded as, is not regarded as a lower income country. I wouldn't really go into statistics because I'm not an economist, but I would say that as a country, poverty could still be experienced. When you move from big cities to rural areas, you could see poverty. In numbers, it looks good, but there are challenges, and among them is that uneven development, but also youth unemployment. I have people who I graduated with in 2017 and they haven't found a sustainable employment, something that you could count in for years. They're working in unofficial sectors or sectors that are not really registered, so not much of them are paying taxes and all that. And this brings the question of these numbers and the real life. So those two parts really bring in a big question of these numbers. I believe World Bank have been doing some numbers on Tanzania, and one of their overview, speaking of youth unemployment and how they intervene into these economical challenges. There are some projects that you could look at and say, well, this project materialized and it reached what is on paper, could be a game changer to many places. I think as a country, there is lots to do than what has been done.
All right. And what about the infrastructure boom under President Samia? How sustainable is it?
Well, can't call them white elephant project because I think they are meaningful. When you speak of road infrastructures, when you speak of energy infrastructures, the hydropower in Rufiji River, there's a big project going on at the center of the country, at the capital, with the airport and this road to connect the capital to all the sides of the country. So this is a thing to be commended. If anyone has used the standard gauge railway in Tanzania, could say that, well, it's one of its kind in sub-Saharan region. And when you look at our neighbors, and this project looking to extend to go as far as to the west part of the country, and this is mean connecting with other East African Community member states. And this is a continuation of what President Magufuli started, making projects a priority so that there is an easy way of transporting products and people, and this has a way to revamp the economy. I think this is one of the things that could be commended. They're positive part of this government and the economical perspective.
Can we say that Tanzania's economic and political stability are closely tied together?
I can say that. One thing political stability gives you is a chance to attract investments. That's what I believe. And looking forward to what other countries have, you have resources, but you don't have peace. So this is pushing investment away because there's an uncertainty and there's risk in investing in such states. So this political stability gives a chance for investment to come, especially foreign direct investment, which are important in developing a country like Tanzania.
All right. Let us talk about the media. How are traditional and social media shaping the political scene this time around?
I believe millions of Tanzanians are still getting their news from radio and television. It's something that you cannot overlook. But for the young people, the social media is among the sources of their information. So you have a vibrant internet presence of the Gen Z and millennials. TikTok and Twitter or X has been used under VPN in Tanzania. So that shows you that it's something that gets some concern from those in powers. That is the part, but when it comes to traditional medias, they are facing a hard time because every news they have to give, if it scrutinizes the government, they're in danger of a ban. So there is small chance you'll get unbiased news from the traditional medias, or news that would really give you an analysis in a very frank way about what the government is doing about the policy, because there are laws that really limit how these traditional medias work. So that is what you could say about the media. Coming to election, when you look at the traditional medias, even these online TVs on YouTube, there are lots of coverage of the ruling party political activities, campaign, etc. And when you come to social medias, well, if you come to Twitter, you feel like you are in another country, because I follow Tanzanian politics through both. I have some application for some stations, so you watch the news, you read newspapers online, and you see the coverage. So there is still that state of, at one part, you have a traditional media that is really becoming less and less active in criticizing the government, and you have the social medias that also face a very strong cybercrime act or laws, but you still have people who are using unanimously names, and they go and they criticize the government. So I think that the social medias in this election, they also count, because they also have a big following, especially looking at these first-time voters. So I think this is the role that I could comment when we speak about the medias, yes.
And looking ahead, what role can the media play in ensuring a fair and peaceful election? We just talked about how the social media is shaping the political scene this time around. So what is the role the media play in ensuring a fair and peaceful election?
First, I believe avoiding misinformation, which I think the social media has that danger of spreading misinformations, and which is something not good when you speak about democratic values. There should be some transparency, and politics has to be as clean, as responsible, as accountable as possible. There are two things that are going on now, and they will attract the attention of many. One, there is the election. But secondly, there is the treason case of a very, very prominent opposition politician, Tundu Lissu. So the covering of these two is debatable, that, well, the traditional media are not doing enough to cover the case. So I believe the media has a role. There is an example all over the world what the media could do to pass the message that, well, we could go to election, there will be different, but avoiding misinformation or avoiding favorable covering for one side of a political party and then leaving other parties stranded. Because you see less information about ADC, or these are parties, I'm telling you, ADC, TLP, CAF. You see less of this in traditional medias because, as I say, the election look like it's a one-horse race. So that is what the media could do, try to balance the coverage and bring these polls from these other 16 parties candidates to the public, so that they could also hear not only the ruling party narratives.
All right. We are nearing the end, Michael. What is your outlook for the 2025 election and beyond?
I will try to be subjective, because as a concerned citizen, looking at the political environment in our country, there's a chance that we could end up in a wrong side of history. I believe for years there have been a call for reforms, a call for a new constitution. And there was a procedure that started in 2011 and ended up abruptly in 2014. From there till today, this is 11 years, there is no clear picture of how we want to rule our country. I believe going forward, there is this urge of sitting together, having a roundtable talk, and reaching a way that we could be at least holding an election in a way that is not leaving some grievances and leaving some wounds. Because, for instance, in Zanzibar, they have wounds. One of them is in 2001. So this act of violence and repression, they shouldn't be part of the election, because this is what people could elect to election, when they support opposition or when they fight for opposition candidate to win. So the winner, which as it is the incumbent will win, should look forward, just consolidating power, and find a way to sit down with a true political will to making sure that the next 5 years we are not having the same conversation we're having today of an election that is controversial in different perspectives. So that is what I could comment in that.
So maybe the real legacy of 2025 won't be about who wins, but about how Tanzania manages the process.
Yeah, I used to look at our country as a balloon. You put lots of air into a balloon and it stays with this air, but it's so contracted, right? This is how elections have been feeling in our country, that every time we do election, we pump more air into the balloon and the balloon expands. So what do? you don't put more air into the balloon, because the election is not only on the date of voting, it goes beyond that. This is what democracy is, on power changes and what follows after election. If there be post-election violence or there be post-election peace, those are the things to count on. That Tanzania as it is has to go beyond just keeping the ruling party in power to making sure that the country is governable by the best candidate possible who win the election without question. And this could also copying from some neighbors. As an East African community, you can look at Kenya and how they conduct the election, or you can look at a country like Botswana, which is commended not only in Africa but worldwide on how they conduct the election. We had the case of Malawi a few weeks ago, that the incumbent lose the election because the votes decide. So these are, I believe, should be the way forward. Looking at a way, what a legacy of 2020 and 2025 election make us as a country change how we conduct the election and how we practice democracy, because I think this is the only way that you can develop as a state if you call yourself democratic and you practice it fully.
Actually, that's a great note to end on. Big thanks to our production team, Brian and Frida, and to you, Michael, for sharing your insight and perspectives.
It has been an honor to share my perspective, and hope to talk to you some days.
And to our listeners, Tanzania's 2025 election isn't just about politics. It's about institutions, accountability, and the future of democracy in East Africa. Stay informed, think critically, and engage constructively, because democracy depends on you. You've been listening to the Great Lakes Crisis. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time as we continue exploring the forces shaping Africa's Great Lakes region.